This is the last photo ever taken of 12-year-old Jared Negrete. It was discovered on his camera, abandoned on the edge of a mountaintop in 1991. Since the day it was found, his family and investigators have been plagued by a horrible question. Did he take it, or did someone else? Then there's this photo. Some may just see a pig in a pen. Others, however, see something much more sinister. The body of 12-year-old Lynn Marler. Today, we're going to take a look at 3 of the most baffling, unsolved child disappearances of all time. With each disappearance, there's a photo, a snapshot in time that's provided more questions than answers. Case number 1, Jared Negrete. This is San Gorgonio, the highest mountain peak in Southern California. And this is 12-year-old Jared Negrete, who was eager to enjoy his first overnight camping trip with his Boy Scout troop there on the night of July 19, 1991. Jared lived in El Monte, a city in the nearby San Gabriel Valley with stunning views of the mountain ranges to the north and the east. He had grown up in a close-knit family that practiced Mormonism, giving him a large extended community who knew him well. It was there that he became involved with his Boy Scout troop, which was sponsored by his church and made up of other members from it. Heading up the trail of San Gorgonio, Jared was reportedly in good spirits in the early morning of the 19th. He was surrounded by his troop, people he trusted and loved, and his scoutmaster, Dennis Knight, who was a close friend of his family. But soon, the terrain of the climb became a bit too much for Jared. San Gorgonio reaches a staggering 11,503 feet in elevation, high enough to induce elevation sickness. At just 12, Jared wasn't the most experienced hiker, and with the terrain becoming increasingly difficult, he began to lag behind at an area of the Vivian Creek Trail known as the Switchbacks. It was somewhere along here where Jared stopped behind his troop. To this day, it's not known if there were words exchanged between him and his fellow troopmates or his scoutmaster. What is known, however, is that at about 6 p.m., a retired Santa Ana firefighter, James Robertson, spotted Jared walking through here at about a 10,200-foot elevation. According to Robertson, Jared was hiking off-trail, cutting through the switchbacks to make his climb back down faster. Robertson told Jared to be careful and that it's best to stay on the trail so you don't get lost or erode the natural landscape. Jared apologized, and Robertson continued to the summit. When Robertson reached the peak, he discovered the rest of Jared's troop. Reportedly, he told the scoutmaster that he had seen Jared cutting through the switchbacks, and the troop leader didn't seem concerned, telling him that they were planning to collect him on the way back down the mountain. But as they descended the mountain, there was no sign of Jared. The troop began to call him. Their yells echoed between the canyon walls, but they got no response. Night was beginning to fall by the time they reached the campground at the mountain's base, and the scoutmaster knew that if they were going to find Jared, they needed help. The scoutmaster hiked 12 miles through the dark to reach a station with service so he could phone the police and file a missing persons report. By daybreak, the mountain was crawling with search and rescue teams, local police, and other volunteers. Though the terrain might not look completely treacherous to some, the mountains are unforgiving. There are sheer drop-offs from cliffs that are hidden by dense brush, concealing 200 or 300-foot drops below. Not only is most of the trail vertical, but the trails themselves are known for being confusing, making it easy to get turned around. Then there was the sheer amount of distance that the search had to cover. For the first 3 days, the search area was 130 square miles. Then, finally, searchers stumbled upon their first clue. Lying in the dirt at about a 10,000-foot elevation on the High Creek Trail, a team discovered footprints in the dirt. the footprints were a match for Jared's shoe size, as well as the shoes he was wearing, a pair of new high-top sneakers. Around the footprints, searchers discovered candy wrappers and beef jerky, which Jared was known to have on his person when he went missing. Everyone involved in the search for Jared was elated. This spot was 3 miles from where he was last seen, which allowed them to narrow down their search radius to an area of 6 square miles instead of 130. But that 6 square miles proved to be challenging. The chaparral vegetation was so thick and spiky that searching 150 feet took roughly an hour. A local tracker, Butch Lawson, arrived to see if he could follow Jared's footprints, but it proved to be one of the most frustrating instances of his career. According to him, Jared's footsteps indicated that he was running or scared due to the long length of the stride. But every time Lawson tried to follow the tracks, they would disappear. The idea that he was scared and running for his life was heartbreaking for his parents, Felipe and Linda Negrete. That idea became much, much worse when his camera was discovered on a slope near where his footprints were found. There were 12 photos on the camera. In the beginning, they were just photos of the beautiful landscape around him. And then, there was the last photo. Because of the flash and the camera settings, it was clear to investigating agencies that the photo was taken late into the night. Some people claimed to see the glint of an animal's eyes in the darkness behind Jared's head. Others, however, just see a lost, scared child. It's unknown if Jared took this photo of himself or if someone else took it of him. Some theorize that Jared took the photo to light up the darkness around him and see as he made his way down the unforgiving mountain. Regardless, it gave investigators and his family some hope. They knew that as night fell, he was still alive. After the camera was discovered, the investigation ramped up. Jared was known to have a backpack on his person with a canteen of water, and there was plenty of fresh water on the mountain to drink. He was wearing a traditional Boy Scout outfit, but the temperatures weren't dipping low enough to make hypothermia a concern. Everyone was hopeful that he was still out there, and they needed to put all of their manpower into finding him. Marines from a nearby base flew in to help with the investigation. Jared's parents, who were devastated, went up in a helicopter to call down to their son over a megaphone. There were planes, radar, helicopters, horses, dogs, and hundreds of people searching the mountain. 5 days became 6. 6 became 7. 1 week became 2. The search grew more desperate with every day, and stranger discoveries were on the horizon. In a single news article, law enforcement disclosed that they found a crop of marijuana plants worth over $100,000, or around $250,000 today. There is no mention of if it is believed that this discovery could somehow tie into Jared's disappearance. After several weeks, the search for Jared was called off, devastating his friends and family. A memorial was held at the Mormon Cathedral in Hacienda Heights. 500 people were in attendance, but not everyone was willing to come in. As Jared's brother and his father cried at the ceremony, his uncle Ramon refused to come in the doors. When asked by the media why he was standing outside, Ramon responded, "To the day I die, I'll believe that this church and the Boy Scouts of America are responsible for my nephew's death." Ramon didn't elaborate on this any further, and the family has denied any wrongdoing by the church or by the Boy Scouts. The scoutmaster, Dennis Knight, was released from his position just days after Jared went missing. It was determined that he had broken safety rules by only having one adult present on the trip, and by failing to file a report of the troops' plans with the council before they left for the overnight excursion. Jared's family has publicly stated that they do not blame Knight, and that they feel nothing but love and respect for him. But for a few weeks, It seems they had doubts about Jared wandering off into the wilderness. The family hired a private investigator, George Turner, to look into the possibility that Jared was kidnapped. A few miles away from where Jared disappeared, and just 2 months later, a 10-year-old boy had been kidnapped while he was camping. Soon after the Negretes hired Turner, however, they called off the probe. Turner told the media that they called it off because the church ordered them to, a statement that the Negretes' lawyer vehemently denied. To this day, no one knows what happened to Jared Negrete. His father suffered from stress-induced pneumonia following his disappearance, and his family was never quite the same. Much like the family in our next case. These are the Alabama farmlands that 12-year-old Sherry Lynn Marler loved. Growing up on a 400-acre property outside of Greenville, she was known by locals as Little Farmer. Her greatest pride in life was that she could run a tractor by herself, and that if her family needed help toiling under the sun, she was the one everyone knew could get the job done with a smile on her face. At 5'4", she was barely tall enough to see over the steering wheel of her family's tractor, but that didn't deter her from spending all day, every day, working out in the rolling fields where her family grew wheat, corn, soybeans, and oats. In the summer of 1984, Sherry was reportedly as happy as her family had ever seen her. Her mother, Betty Stringfellow, distinctly remembers an instance where Sherry burst into the house, beaming from ear to ear. She told her, Mama, I just put my 1,000th mile on my moped." Sherry loved using her moped to dart around the red dirt roads in her rural community, and she was eager to turn 13 so she would be old enough to get a three-wheeler. Tragically, she never got that opportunity. On the morning of June 6, 1984, Sherry reportedly woke up on the couch. She had given a relative who was visiting her room for the night, but she didn't mind. According to her family, she awakened as soon as the sun rose every morning anyway. That fateful morning, she was up at dawn as soon as her stepfather, Raymond Stringfellow, started brewing his first pot of coffee. Shirley's mother and her biological father, Ralph, had broken up when she was much younger, leaving Raymond to raise Sherry as his own. He had 3 children from his previous marriage, and Sherry had a teenage brother, Larry, so the house was always buzzing with activity. Sherry loved the quiet mornings, watching the sun rise before anyone else was up. Sherry and her stepfather headed out into the fields like they did every morning. That morning, however, they ran into a problem. Their combine, equipment used to harvest grains, wasn't running. Raymond realized they would need a loan to replace it, so he told Sherry that after they checked on the rest of the crops, he was going to go to the bank, about 12 miles away in downtown Greenville. When he was prepared to head out, Sherry reportedly stumbled to get her shoes on. When Raymond asked where she was going, she smiled up at her stepfather and said, "With you." The two made the drive downtown. When they arrived, they parked behind the bank in a large parking lot. It was about 9:30 a.m. on that warm summer day when Sherry reportedly asked Raymond for money to buy a soda. He gave her $1 and sent her on her way, while he went inside to negotiate a loan with the banker. Sherry ran across this street to what used to be a gas station in this building. There are no reports on if she was seen inside the gas station, nor by any passers-by. As soon as she crossed the road, she essentially vanished. Raymond returned to the car from the bank after about 15 minutes and was surprised to see Sherry was still gone. He assumed she must have run into a classmate at the gas station, but as the minutes ticked on, he got more and more ticked off. After waiting about 10 minutes, Raymond got out of the truck and began to call for Sherry. Despite thorough searching, he couldn't find her at the gas station or on any nearby streets. Panic began to set in. By noon that day, he had filed a missing persons report, and professional searches for Sherry were underway. Within 24 hours, all of Sherry's relatives and friends had been contacted, but no one had heard from her. Planes surveyed the town and nearby fields, including the family farm, but there was not a single sign of her. Betty, Raymond, and Larry were pacing at home, going mad with worry. Naturally, all of them were involved in the searches, but each day came with more questions than answers. By July 16th, the Montgomery Advertiser announced that law enforcement believed that foul play was involved in her disappearance. Surprisingly, both Betty and Raymond declined to take a lie detector test. In response to pressure to do so by local media, Raymond told reporters, "We haven't done anything we're ashamed of. We didn't do anything to prompt Sherry to run away. If she is somewhere, I didn't put her there." It seems that local law enforcement believed Raymond because both he and Betty were cleared as suspects in spite of refusing to take a polygraph test. It should be noted that polygraph tests aren't admissible in court and can be unreliable, and that declining one isn't suspicious in itself. However, it certainly rubbed some locals the wrong way, especially at Larry's high school. Reportedly, rumors about Sherry's disappearance became so inescapable and vitreous that Larry quit school in the fall of 1984 when he was just 16 years old. About a month into the search, calls began to come in reporting sightings of Sherry. One time, she was reportedly seen in St. Stephen's, Alabama, about a 2-hour drive away from where she was last seen. Shortly after this call, another person called to report a girl matching Sherry's appearance at a truck stop in Conley, Georgia, 2 hours in the other direction. About a month later, as 1984 came to a close, another caller stated to have seen Sherry at a mall in New Orleans, 4 hours southwest of her hometown. Witness statements are frequently unreliable, but there was something about these three that stuck out to law enforcement. In each instance, the girl matching Sherry's description was seen with an older man, described as about 50 years old and 5'8". He had a husky build, wrinkles around his eyes, and a weathered complexion. The man was reported as not having much of an expression, but sadly, in all three cases, the woman matching Sherry's description was said to be noticeably upset, with a dazed and disheveled appearance. The fact that all three of the leads are so similar, in spite of being from different callers over 100 miles away from each other, makes them probable. But was the woman Sherry, or just someone who looked like her? Unfortunately, law enforcement still don't have that answer. Newspaper articles report that there were also sightings of this girl traveling with a trucker in Mississippi and Florida, though none of these are reported on her Charlie Project or NamUs profile. Ken Flowers, the Greenville police captain, told a local newspaper that this case was the most baffling in his 11-year career, and as the years passed, it has only grown more so. In 1986, a person called from Arizona to report that they knew something about Sherry's disappearance. Before police could respond, however, they hung up. From there, leads went from being a trickle to utterly non-existent. Sherry's family was forced to go on with life, unsure of what happened to her. In 2003, 20 years after his stepdaughter's disappearance, Raymond Stringfellow passed away. On his deathbed, he held Betty's hands and told her that he didn't know what happened to Sherry, and that he wished he could get out of bed, find her, and bring her back to his wife. To this day, Betty is still actively looking for her daughter. If you thought her disappearance was strange before, this is where it gets stranger. There is a Facebook page titled Sherry Lynn Marler, Still Missing. Betty was an active participant in this group, encouraging the woman who runs it, who we will refer to as R. With a group of other women from Alabama, R has taken it upon herself to investigate the disappearance and likely murder of Sherry. During her search, she claimed she came upon a family friend of the Stringfellows, who she considered to be a likely suspect. The supposed suspect had passed, but his wife was still alive. When R spoke to the wife, she gave R a box of photographs from the farm they once owned near Sherry's farm. The photos were her husband's, and she had never looked at them. Folded up in the box of photos, she discovered this. To her, the object in the bottom left corner undeniably looks like a head. If you know anything about pigs, you know that they will eat absolutely anything. There have been a number of cases where victims have been disposed of in this manner, including by serial killers like Robert Picton in Canada. To many, this head looks like a match for Sherry Lynn Marler, and that isn't the only photograph linked to Sherry Lynn Marler's disappearance. This photo was discovered by Sherry's brother Larry in a Bible in an empty trailer in Butler County. It is undeniable that the woman laying on the bed in the photo is Sherry, but no one knows who the girl she is with is. Larry believes that the photo may have been taken after Sherry's disappearance. To this day, the truth of these photos and of Sherry's fate remains a mystery. Age-progressed photos have been created to show what she would look like today at 53 years old. After all this time of holding on, her family deserves closure. If you know what happened to Sherry, or have any tips related to the photos or her case in general, please contact the Greenville, Alabama Police Department at 334-382-3107.
It was 4 a.m. on February 14th, 2000. The last time anyone reportedly saw 9-year-old Asha Degree alive. The tiny child was seen walking on the edge of a rural highway as a storm raged overhead. For 20 years, there were no leads about what happened to Asha or why she was walking down a desolate highway during a storm in the first place. As of this month, that has changed. For the very first time, suspects' names have arisen in the case of Asha Degree, and law enforcement has officially labeled her death a homicide. But who are these suspects, and how do they tie into this young girl's unexplainable disappearance on that cold February night? Today we will discuss the case of Asha Degree and take a detailed look at the newest developments. Asha Degree was at the very beginning of what should have been a long, beautiful life. At 9 years old, her radiant presence made her a beloved fixture in her 4th grade classroom and her basketball team at Falston Elementary School. She was known for being kind and shy, but enthusiastic about what she loved. Her family was religious and avoided outside influences they felt could corrupt their kids' morals. There was no computer in their home, and the shows the children watched were monitored. As a result, Asha wasn't one to approach strangers. She was a bit of a mummy and daddy's girl, sticking to them like glue whenever they were by her side. That's precisely why her actions in the early morning hours of February 14th still bewilder her family to this day. Asha went to bed in the bedroom she shared with her 10-year-old brother O'Brien at around 8 p.m. on the 13th. Around 9, a car accident knocked out the power, which didn't flicker back to life until around midnight. Asha's father, Harold, popped his head into his kids' bedroom to check on them before he went to bed at about 2:30 a.m. In the dim light, he saw his children curled up in their beds, fast asleep. Asha was tucked away in her floral blankets, wearing a white nightgown with a fuzzy teddy bear on the front. She was a picture of innocence. Asha sleeping peacefully in her bed is the last time Harold ever saw his daughter. Sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., O'Brien heard a squeak from Asha's bed. At the time, he assumed she was having trouble sleeping because of the storm raging outside. In reality, that squeak was the sound of Asha slipping out of her bed. She grabbed a backpack law enforcement believes she had spent days preparing and snuck out into the winter night. To this day, no one knows what Asha was preparing for or why a young girl who was terrified of the dark would head out onto a pitch-black highway in the middle of a storm. For reference, Sarah Almond, going by the YouTube name What Would She Do? The Show, posted this video walking the same route Asha would have been taking at the same time of night.
I just wanted to try to show what it looks like out here for a little 9-year-old girl to take this walk at this time of night.
According to Asha's family, friends, and teachers, she was a strict rule follower who was wary of strangers and terrified of the nighttime. What could have possibly driven her to walk along this terrifying stretch of road? Sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., a truck driver named Jeff Rupp saw a young girl dressed in all white walking along Highway 18. He turned to see if his eyes were deceiving him, but they weren't. When he confirmed that it really was a child walking through the darkness in the dead of night, he made yet another turn, this time to see if she needed help. As he approached her, however, the girl, matching Asha's description, ran off and disappeared into trees at the edge of the road. With work to do, the man continued driving, but he couldn't shake the strangeness of what he had seen. The man saw this girl, widely believed to be Asha, about a mile from her home, or about a 20-minute walk. She was spotted outside the Turner residence and was seen running toward a shed on their property. Keep this in mind, because there are some disputes about the shed that we'll have to go into later. Another driver, Roy Blarton Jr., also reported seeing Asha around this time. Without getting a close look, he assumed it was a woman who was leaving a domestic argument of some kind. His description, however, matched the description that Rupp gave exactly, leading police to believe that it was Asha who was on the highway that fateful night. At 5:45 a.m., Asha's mother, Equilla, woke up to get her kids ready for school. When she opened the bedroom door, Asha was nowhere to be seen. In a panic, she and Harold began to search the house, their cars, and the neighbors for their daughter. After not finding her inside the home or at nearby relatives' residences, Equilla called law enforcement. At 6:40, officers arrived and began searching the neighborhood. Members of Asha's church and several of her neighbors took the day off of work.
It was cold, foggy, raining a little bit that day. And like I told Harold, it's going to get better. We're going to find her before dark fall, but we didn't. And I don't understand why we couldn't find her.
The following day, February 15th, law enforcement began investigating the tips provided by the two truckers who claimed to have seen Asha walking through the storm. Following where Asha was last seen, investigators began to search the Turner property. On that property, in a shed, officers discovered several items that Asha's mother claimed belonged to Asha. These items included a yellow hair bow, candy wrappers matching candy that Asha had gotten with her basketball team, and a green marker. In addition, there was this photo. To this day, the girl in the picture has never been publicly identified. There are claims that the FBI has determined that the photo is not linked to the case, and as such, no information has been released. That being said, there's been no statement from local or federal law enforcement regarding this photo. Though Equilla claims the items in the shed belong to Asha, the FBI has also never agreed that they are. The shed they were discovered in was used for storage for several years, so it's not unlikely that the generic items found their way into it prior to Asha's disappearance. On the 16th, Equilla, desperate to find her baby girl, discovered that Asha had taken several items with her the night she disappeared, including some of her favorite clothing items, her basketball uniform, and a pair of jeans with a red stripe up the side. Within a week of her disappearance, 9,000 man-hours had been invested into the massive search for Asha. Sadly, aside from the sightings of her along the side of the highway, law enforcement had absolutely no leads. In the months that followed, Asha's parents were repeatedly blamed for their daughter's disappearance. However, they remained steadfast, cooperating with law enforcement and even going on national talk shows to get as many people as possible looking for their daughter.
We still have hope. We don't think she's dead, but we still need help.
Just keep praying for me and my family and that she will return home.
For over a year, there was not a single lead about what happened to Asha. Then, on August 3, 2001, Asha's backpack was discovered. About 26 miles north of Asha's last known location, a construction project had begun near Morganton on the edge of Highway 18. It's a sparsely populated, densely forested area. There, a construction worker discovered a backpack wrapped in 2 trash bags. Confused, he looked inside and found Asha's name written in Sharpie inside the backpack. It was a devastating discovery. Police have yet to reveal everything inside the bag, but in 2020, they disclosed that it contained a copy of McElligot's Pool, a book by Dr. Seuss that had Asha's elementary school stamp on the cover. However, Asha had never checked out the book, and there was no record of who did. In addition, the backpack contained this New Kids on the Block t-shirt. Asha didn't own this t-shirt before her disappearance, and it's worth noting that the shirt is for a band that wasn't popular in Asha's age group in 2000. The bag's double wrapping gave some indication that whoever disposed of it didn't want it destroyed, but still needed it to be concealed. It's safe to assume that law enforcement didn't expect to find Asha alive after discovering her abandoned backpack. At the same time, they could never have expected just how helpful the discovery of that backpack would someday be. The FBI took several DNA samples from within the bag. At the time of the discovery, DNA wasn't advanced enough to help them. But by 2024, DNA has come a long way. So far, in fact, that the DNA found in Asha's backpack finally led the FBI and law enforcement descending on a farm in Shelby just miles from Asha's home.
For days, the FBI, SBI, and the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office swarmed multiple properties that are all connected on multiple acres.
These are the full warrants for the properties that law enforcement meticulously searched for several days, and they provide the first peek into their pursuit to find Asha Degree. Back in 2001, items found in Asha's backpack were protected until they could be thoroughly tested. 2 DNA samples were eventually extracted, but they were not a match for anyone in CODIS. CODIS is the Combined DNA Index System, a catalog of the DNA of every criminal across all United States agencies. However, as genealogical data has become more widespread and understood because of companies like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA, the samples at law enforcement's fingertips have expanded. Using new genealogical DNA testing, law enforcement narrowed the DNA samples they found in Asha's backpack down to 2 individuals. Asha's undershirt was discovered inside the garbage bag with her backpack. On that undershirt was a single hair stem sample, and that sample belonged to a woman named Annalee Dedman. Another DNA sample belonged to Russell Bradley Underhill, known to also have gone by Rusty Hill. The most important thing that needs to be understood with these leads is that law enforcement knows much, much more than we do. For years, the public crucified Asha's family members, spreading rumors, sullying their reputation, and giving them a lifetime of grief to process. With the FBI's recent announcement that Asha's parents are not suspects, the public is faced with the realization that they condemned innocent, grieving parents for nearly 2 decades. As of now, neither Annalee Dedman nor Russell Bradley Underhill have been named suspects in Asha's disappearance. However, 2 people connected to them have been. You see, Annalee Dedman was just 13 years old when Asha disappeared. She's the daughter of Connie and Roy Lee Dedman, 2 prominent members of the Shelby community. Russell Bradley Underhill passed away in 2004 due to what is presumed to have been a heart condition. Russell spent the majority of his life in and out of care facilities, including ones that were owned by Connie and Roy Dedman. Through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, the Dedmans operated 2 nursing facilities, Cleveland Healthcare and Northbrook Rest Home. Little is known about why Russell, who was only in his 40s during the 90s, lived in a facility. However, his autopsy lists that he struggled with alcohol dependency, depression, and substance use, which may be why he opted to live in a facility rather than by himself. The DNA of Russell and Annalee being found on Asha's belongings created a massive stir online, with many people positively declaring that Annalee and her 2 siblings must have gone for a joyride and killed Asha. However, if you look closer at the warrant and realize the purpose of a search warrant, that assertion begins to crack. An investigating agency gives a judge a search warrant to prove that they have cause to investigate a property and seize someone's belongings. The purpose of a search warrant is not to lay out every detail of the case to the judge. It is simply for the judge to see clearly why they need to search the property and to approve of them doing so. The search warrant for the Dedmans' main property on Cherryville Road outlines that Roy and Connie Dedman are the only links between Annalee and Russell. You see, Connie was the administrator of Russell's medication in the facility where he lived in 2000, when Asha went missing. Roy not only worked at that same facility, but was also Russell's emergency contact. In an interview conducted with a social services worker, law enforcement learned that Roy would often send his oldest daughter to transport patients from the nursing facility to Broughton Hospital, a mental health treatment center in Morganton. And because of the age of Anna Lee, the warrant states this: due to the ages of Roy Dedman and Connie Dedman's 3 daughters, investigators believe adult assistance from Roy Dedman and Connie would have been necessary in the execution and/or concealment of the crime. This statement has caught a lot of attention and has been routinely misinterpreted. Again, the job of a search warrant is to claim probable cause to search a property, not to tell the judge exactly what happened. This statement isn't saying that Connie and Roy helped commit and conceal a daughter's crime. It's saying that for Anna Lee's DNA to be on Asha's belongings, her parents must be involved in some way because she was a minor. Further down, the document clearly states that Roy and Connie are both suspects. Nowhere else in the document does it identify anyone else as a suspect. These search warrants were approved by a judge, allowing the government to search several properties. These include 621 Cherryville Road in Shelby, the home where Roy, Connie, and the children lived at the time of Asha's disappearance; 601 Cherryville Road, a property owned by the Dedmans; a property on Hawthorne Lane in Shelby, where Connie lived at the time the warrant was issued; a property in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Anna Lee lived at the time the warrant was issued; and finally, Northbrook Rest Home in Vail, North Carolina, where Russell lived for a time under the operation of Connie and Roy. In addition to the properties, search warrants were issued to allow buccal swabs to be taken from Anna Lee, Roy, and Connie. In the warrant for Roy's DNA, it reads, "It is possible that Roy Lee Dedman's DNA could match DNA evidence related to this incident and/or could match DNA profiles derived from evidence collected and entered into CODIS that currently remain unidentified. Cause exists to obtain this DNA evidence from Roy." A buccal swab was taken from all 3 parties, but the items taken from the Cherryville property caused the most significant reaction. In 2016, law enforcement told the media that they had received a tip that Asha may have been seen getting pulled into a green 1970s model Lincoln Continental Mark IV, or a Ford Thunderbird from the same period. On the Dedmans' property in their 2024 search, they discovered a green 1964 AMC Rambler. Take a look and see how the car compares. Many believe this is the car that Asha may have been pulled into in 2000. The vehicle was taken for additional testing, and that wasn't all. From the Cherryville property, law enforcement took dozens of phones, laptops, computer towers, VHS tapes, cassette tapes, a shoe sole, pieces of red fabric, and a human tooth in a Ziploc bag. In addition, they took several pages of documents, a pair of Carhartt jeans, children's clothing, and lastly, a .22 caliber rifle. As a result of the search, Roy and Connie Dedman's attorney made a public statement to the media. You are about to see why it rubbed many people the wrong way.
Next week, I believe the search warrant that was executed at 621 Cherryville Road will be made public. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I think it's likely to happen. And when you read the affidavit, it may be more clear to you why there was a search at 621 Cherryville Road and some other locations. I think there will also be information in that search warrant that sadly will link a person to the circumstances of Asha's disappearance that is no longer living. And it's very possible, not saying that the person that was named in the search warrant had anything to do with her disappearance, because I don't know any more than you do, or any more than the Sheriff's Department or the FBI or the SBI does. But it's very possible that that person, who's no longer here, has the answer as to what happened to Asha. And the answer may very well never be known. And I'm here on behalf of a gentleman by the name of Roy Dedman, who hired me to assist him with some events that have occurred at his home at 621 Cherryville Road. Now, Roy came to see me after he had already spoken with law enforcement and while the search at his home was ongoing. And I have been informed by Roy that he was questioned about the Asha Degree disappearance. And he told law enforcement that he had no information about what happened to Asha. He wasn't withholding any information about what happened to Asha. And I am aware that just about every family member of Roy Dittman has been interviewed. And those individuals, his wife and his 3 daughters, have also said that they don't know what happened to Asha Degree and don't have any information about what happened to Asha Degree.
It became clear to the public that Roy and Connie's attorney was blaming Russell for Asha's disappearance and claiming that Russell was the reason the search was being conducted, not the Deadmans. Russell is gone, so he cannot speak for himself. With this being the first break in the Asha Degree case in over 20 years, rumors have spread like wildfire. It's essential to review the facts. As of now, only Roy and Connie have been named suspects, and that was out of a desire to search their property. There is no publicly known link between the Deadmans and Asha. At the time of Asha's disappearance, the Deadman children were several years older than Asha, and they didn't attend the same school. We will hopefully have answers within the next few months. At the core of this mystery and the excitement surrounding it is a little girl who never got to grow up, and a family who misses her terribly. If you have any information about the disappearance of Asha Degree, please contact Cleveland County Sheriff's Office at 704-484-4822 or the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI.